Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me once again. So we're going to be going into Vertical Marriage, Chapter 8, which is entitled The Healing Journey. Now, this is by far the most expansive, really, portion, I think, of getting ready for marriage and then maintaining a solid marriage over decades. And there's so much material we can cover here, but what I'm going to do first of all is establish some kind of core foundation pillars, areas that I have just kind of formulated over the course of the past, 35 years or so of ministry and almost 40 years of marriage, and what I've seen in my own life and what I've seen in marriages around me, marriages that we've counseled, etc. So first of all, getting to the book, and I assume that you have, of course, a copy of Vertical Marriage. If you've gone this far in the teaching, or maybe you started in this session, either way. So the healing journey, I'm just going to kind of skim through, touch upon a few points in the chapter, and then establish some core foundations, bring in some additional material that's not in the book, because there's always new material coming out, new books that I'm kind of trying to stay abreast of, reading and seeking the Lord about keys to building strong marriages. So just starting out in the book, I quote something that I read in this book called The Life Model. And by the way, in another session, I'm going to probably do some kind of a recommended reading segment. In the back of Vertical Marriage, there is a recommended reading resource already there, but I might want to add a few more books to it and maybe talk a little bit about each of the books. So I plan to do an extra added video segment that's just all about recommended resources. So we'll do that. But for now, I do want to mention the book called The Life Model, and in Chapter 8, so I want to read this quotation that's in Chapter 8. People have a God-given inner desire to increase their maturity so they will be able to live from their hearts. Gosh, so much there just in that one sentence. Increasing our maturity so we can live authentically from our heart. Maturity is often blocked, however, and the blocks usually come from absences in two other areas: unfinished trauma recovery and the lack of life-giving relationships. Wow. So important to be healed from the trauma we've experienced in our lives. Everybody experiences some trauma in their life growing up over the course of life. And two main types of trauma, type A, type B is how they define it. One is more kind of a overt, trauma that's things that are done to you in a very bold fashion, being abused, being hit, being yelled at. Then there's the other type of trauma that's more subtle, more kind of like being neglected, not even being noticed, which is also very traumatic. And most of us have both of those in our life history along the way. Could be from parents, could be from peers, schoolmates, extended family, just in the course of life. And it continues even on into adulthood. There could be people that are not nice to us, right? That ignore us or that mistreat us, directly. And so these three areas mentioned in the life model, first of all, maturity, then recovery, overcoming trauma, getting healed, and then belonging, having life-giving relationships. And so maturity is basically having a healthy awareness of who you are, and also taking responsibility for your own actions and your own feelings. Now, if you've been a parent, you know that you expect a certain level of maturity from your child as they grow, and it's commensurate to their age generally, right? So as they get older, you expect them to mature, and by the time they become a teenager and a young adult, you expect them to be having healthy awareness of who they are and taking responsibility. So there's maturity, very necessary in marriage. There's recovery, and that's acknowledging and facing, some of my trigger points, some of my dysfunction, some of the areas that I know I'm weak in my life. And basically, huge principle here is that getting in touch with your pain is the beginning of redeeming your pain. So we need to get in touch with what's hurting inside of us. And oftentimes with a married couple, we try to focus on, each individual spouse and help them to get in touch with their own personal pain. And of course, I will often mention the 80-20 principle that I use, that 80% of the time, it's really the main focus needs to be on the personal inner growth of each individual spouse. 20% of the time, a marital issue might be because of what one spouse is doing or not doing, like legitimately. The big major sins, of course, the major transgressions would be like infidelity, abusive behavior, irresponsibility, stuff like that. It's real and legit. But 80% of the time, I'd say, when a marriage comes in to see us and they just need a tune-up, and it's not so much what the one spouse is doing or not doing, but it's basically just what's in your heart, what's going on in your individual heart. Let's touch upon that first. So we are called to live not in the wound, but in the promise. So we all have wounded areas from our past, but we also have promises from God that we're trusting in and believing in. And then belonging is just, accessing the life-giving relationships that are around us. We all need that. And so over the seasons of marriage, the casting characters in your story will vary. If you have a close friend or another couple that's a close friend that's with you through the seasons of your life, even over decades, I think we have like a few of those. Those are kind of rare. You're blessed if you have that, but we all need that in our lives. So those three areas: maturity, how am I doing just in acknowledging my own self, being aware of my own self; recovery, am I aware of the things that I'm just still working through, wounded parts of my heart; and then belonging, am I being vulnerable, am I attached to and in relationship with other people that can bring life to me. And then another section in that chapter 8 talks about expressing your needs. So our natural inclination is generally towards not expressing our needs. Most of us, myself included, were not perhaps raised in a nurturing environment where your parents and your caregivers were encouraging you to express what you were feeling, kind of drawing it out of you, being discerning to see if you were hurting or if you were carrying something in your heart that was, heavy or whatever, and finding a way to, whether getting on your level, playing with you as a child, interacting with you, to kind of draw it out. Most of us didn't really have a nurturing environment. My parents loved me the best they knew how. They provided for me, but they never really asked me questions about me, like what I was feeling, what I was going through in my inner life. And so most people suffer from not being heard. Most people suffer from not being heard. And so of all the people in the world, your spouse is the one that you're counting on to be your best friend. And I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen that I call the timeline of transformation. This is not in the book, but it's a simple little graph, and basically just talks about the timeline of our lives and how over the course of time there's different seasons of growth we're going to go through. When you first get married, you don't know what your spouse is going to be going through, even yourself at year 3 or year 5 or year 12, whatever, of the marriage. But God has a plan, and Romans 8, we are predestined to be conformed to the image of Christ. That's on everybody's bucket list in heaven, and God's going to keep that process going in our lives. And so that's going to be valleys and mountains, ups and downs along the way. So on that timeline of transformation, here's a really important principle. We are making the decision in marriage to fully support, intercede for, and encourage one primary person on their journey through life. And we are relying on them to do the same for us. Wow. That is so good. I mean, my heart has been filled over the years by being married to a woman who has made that decision, even though it may not be, with these particular words, but just by her life, by her character, by her commitment. And I've tried to do the same as well. Fully support, intercede for, encourage. That's the one primary person whose journey I need to be on board with. So next session, we'll continue through this chapter, and we'll see you then.